Welcome into Dealing with the Devils. It's Jack and JD, and the Blue Devils just took a tough loss in Cameron, 65-63 to Virginia. It came down to a couple of points in the end, but ultimately it was the free throw shooting that cost them.
No question about it, Jack. I've been talking about it all year. This is going to be a great example of what happens if you can't bury that free throw in a tight game. They shot 5 for 11. That's 6 points right there. They lose by 2. Yeah, it mattered.
Yep, and you know, this was a game of inches, really. And that's how Virginia plays. They slow down the pace, and so each possession matters more. And while the Blue Devils did play a lot better in the second half, the fact that they were down by 10 points after the first half ultimately, I think, ended up costing them in this one. It felt like a big climb, and yes, they were in it, and it was a really back and forth affair towards the end, but it felt like it took a lot of effort for them to get back those 10 points. It felt like more than 10 points.
Well, I think that's true, but I think if there's one stat that is really, sort of glaring when you look at the box score, it's that Duke committed 16 turnovers to Virginia's 5. And I'm sorry, in a tight game, you're not going to win if you're turning over the ball 16 times. Right,
exactly. And even though Duke out-rebounded Virginia 44-31, Virginia got up 10 more shots, and that's because of the discrepancy there in the turnovers, as JD just alluded to. But, we do have to mention, in a tough loss, Marvin Bagley and Wendell Carter Jr. were both amazing in this game. Bagley with 30 and 14, and Carter with 14 and 15 to go along with 4 assists and 4 blocks. Like, these guys, they carried us in this one. The guard play today was not as strong. They were definitely bothered by that Virginia defense.
I like to talk about Trey Duval, and there were about 3 different Trey Duvals in this game. You had the guy in the first half who was really kind of lost. They took him out at one point to try to get him to gain his composure. Then I will say that Trey Duval led the comeback in the second half. They turned him loose, and he did his thing. He was great. But at the end of the game, that pass, when they were down by 2, and he threw it the length of the court and missed the 2 Virginia defenders, who then deflected it and ultimately got possession. Virginia came the other way, brought the clock down to 8 seconds, hit a tray, and that was the end of the game. So Trey Duval, 3 different personalities in this one.
Yeah, Duval tends to not have anything that's concrete, right? He rarely has a good game where everything went well, and he rarely has a bad game where everything went poorly. Every game, as JD just said, there's like a couple different Trey Duvals within the game. In this one, there was the tough first half performance. He had an amazing start to the second half where it seemed like they lit a fire in him during halftime, and he was playing with a different speed at the start of the second half. And then he had a couple costly errors towards the end of the game, as JD said. And their guards, I thought both Ty Jerome and Kyle Guy played really well, along with Hall in this one. And, honestly, I thought Virginia was very good. This team was definitely beatable, though. They showed that in the second half when they were able to put up double as many points as they did in the first half. But the Blue Devils really struggled. Their guards really struggled to get into any sort of flow on offense. And, Grayson has been struggling recently. Duval has been struggling recently. But Gary Trent was the only one that was surprising. I guess, in a sense, he was due. He was shooting, 68% from 3 the past couple of games. So I guess he's due to have a cold game. But, it really costs them when you don't get anything from the bench. It's just so much is dependent on 2 guys.
Well, and so when you combine Grayson, Trey, and Gary, they were a combined 8 for 26 from the field. And that is just not going to help out in a game like this. But, you've got to credit Virginia's defense. This was a matchup of number 2 versus number 4, and Virginia, this wasn't against an average team. Virginia is a very good basketball team. It is the system created by Tony Bennett, and that defense is very complex. It is a trapping, switching zone that he teaches his team year in, year out. And Jack, as you pointed out, it's, time of possession that Virginia takes. They are very steady. They don't worry about what the score is. You look at the box score and you'd say, how could they be the winning team? And yet, here they are, number 2, and they could wind up, number 1 in the country.
Yeah, well, not only were they 2 and 4 in the country, but Virginia was the number 1 defense, and Duke was the number 1 offense. But before, in last week's recap, we said, if this game was in the 60s, Virginia was going to win this one, and they did. And really, for the Blue Devils, they really played well in the second half, gave themselves a chance to win. And so they could have won this game, even though it was in the 60s. But ultimately, again, it was just too much was dependent on their 2 bigs, and they really weren't getting good entries to them towards the end of the game. It was tough to get good post passes into those guys because of the way the defense switched. And, the Blue Devils have a quick turnaround here coming up Monday against Notre Dame, a team that's still missing Bonzie Colson, but still a quick game. And I think that's going to be good for them to get this one out of their mind.
I agree with you. It's very interesting that if you were watching carefully how the Bigs scored a lot of their baskets, it was either on follow-ups or where they kind of snake their way between defenders. The 2 bigs for Virginia did a really nice job sort of frustrating our 2 bigs. The box score wouldn't tell you that because Bagley would score his 30 and Carter had his 14, and they had lots of rebounds. But you'll see that if you watched a highlight of the game, then you saw how Bagley and Carter were scoring. Half of those points came off of follow-ups and sort of wiggling their way around the defender, using their elbows very, very, very carefully. Sometimes one would say that almost they could have been called on it.
Yeah, and the other big man for Virginia that JD's talking about, Jack Salt, along with DeAndre Hunter, came off the bench for them and played really well against Bagley. I thought matched up well with him athletically, and Virginia did a good job just really keeping everyone in front, limiting easy baskets. That was the thing. The Blue Devils really had no transition baskets in this one, and that's where they usually have a lot of success. They get out in the open court, and they're able to get a couple of easy dunks or lay-ins or three-pointers, what have you, and that was few and far between in this one. Virginia did a good job keeping it slow, playing it to their strengths, and that's what cost the Blue Devils this one, and likely, I will say, the regular season conference championship. But you know what Duke plays for, and that's championships in April, after the tournament in March. And so, JD, any thoughts for Monday's game?
I'm looking for a win, but, this is the ACC. And as we saw with NC State pulling off an overtime victory at North Carolina, anything could happen. And this is a strange Duke team. The more we watch it, the more we recognize that the play of the two bigs is awesome, but it can't carry them the entire game in a really good matchup. And I'm going to contradict myself because, maybe Michigan State wasn't ready, but the play of Grayson with 37 points, I think he had in
37
that game.
Points.
It was just an incredible performance, but we've got to find Grayson and figure out the roles of the rest of the guards if we're going to succeed in the ACC regular season and the ACC tournament and ultimately the big dance.
Yeah, JD, that Grayson Allen who scored 37 points against Michigan State doesn't even seem like the same guy at this point. And, I don't know where his confidence is at, but between him and Duval, who also played extremely well in that game and played really well for most of the second half in this one, they need to find it more consistently. And that's going to be the difference throughout the rest of the season and into March. But that's it for me, guys. That's Dealing with the Devils, and we'll see you on Monday.